do something is trending on Twitter. And of course, this gets rid of all rationality, logic, and reason and completely puts all its weight on emotion. And because we're emotional creatures, and this is an emotional thing, anytime a child dies or an innocent adult or whoever, anytime somebody dies, it's a tragic thing. So there are emotions involved, but you have to rein in the emotions and operate on logic. And I know that doing videos like this, it's like, it's a big yawn. I know, we already know this. Let me just make it clear. Guns don't kill people and guns don't save people. You know, I've heard people go, well, how about the lives that guns have saved guys, guns don't save anybody. Guns don't take life. Guns don't secure life. Guns don't protect life. Human beings do. Guns are just tools. It's like saying hammers build houses. Nail guns build houses. I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've seen it myself. Nail guns and hammers build houses. Really, they just marched themselves onto the construction site and they just started pounding away. Nails don't build houses. Hammers don't build houses. They're just tools. They're pieces of things that you put into a human's hand where you accomplish a task. It just so happens that guns, being a tool, can be used for good to preserve life or for bad to take life. And now we've got a whole bunch of people saying we need to initiate additional common sense. They always put common sense gun laws, like the common sense makes any big difference. What does a gun law do? What is a gun law for? Who is a gun law aimed at? Because it's not gun control. We're not talking about gun control here. We are talking about full-blown people control. And who are the people they want to control? The people who end up being law abiders. Well, those law abiders are the ones who are going to get victimized because those are the ones who are going to obey the laws. But guess what happens to the law abider? He becomes victimized because the criminal becomes empowered. How does the criminal become empowered? Because politicians put out laws that criminals disregard, but law abiders don't. That's why when you go into a post office, the only people that are going to be armed are law enforcement or criminals or people who don't obey laws, because there are people who don't obey laws that aren't criminals. All of the law abiders are going to go, oh my gosh, there's a sign on the door. I shouldn't bring my personal protection device in here. So anytime you're in a post office or an airport, who's going to be armed? The criminals and the police department for the most part. But then I repeat myself, because usually the police department are the criminal cartels and criminal organizations who are taking away the rights of everybody else. This right here shows you that people are immersed in the cult of personality. They are cemented in their minds with cognitive dissonance to the point where they cannot see clearly to make logical, rational, reasonable decisions. It's all based on emotion, and it's based on political party and political affiliation, which is crazy to me.
I was told that when I had a kid, by everyone where I live, I was told this: when you have a kid, man, you'll get more conservative. I promise you that. Well, on day 9 of being a father, I wake up to the news that just up the road in Nashville, there was a school shooting.
What does a school shooting have anything to do with your political affiliation? What does it matter if you're liberal, a centrist, or conservative as far as a school shooting goes? What does that have to do with anything political? This is a person likely, because a high percentage of these school shooters are on some serious pharmaceutical medication. Why is that never taken into consideration? Why isn't there a ban against fully automatic pharmaceutical medication? Never is anything like that.
With that information and knowing which side of the aisle doesn't give a fuck about it, will not even speak of any type of legislation that would halfway prevent this.
And talk about a one-sided way to look at it. Talk about a black and white. Is it really? Now, I don't put it past any politician not to give an F about anything except for the check that's going to come in with their lobbyists from the military industrial complex or the prison industrial complex or the drug war or any of these things. So that's, setting that aside though, I doubt that people who have a beating heart don't give an F about what happened in this Nashville school. And it doesn't matter if there's an R by their name or a D by their name. What if the rationale for somebody who's pro-gun is, hey, You know, at the end of this, if something goes down, you're going to call a guy with a gun anyway. I hate to sound like the NRA, but it's right. You know, a broken clock is right twice a day. Who do you call? When there's a madman with a gun, who do you call? You call a good guy or somebody you perceive to be a good guy with a gun. What if the good guy showed up and he didn't have a gun? You'd be like, why don't you have your gun? Even the liberals would say, why did the police show up and they didn't have their guns? Why did the Uvalde police show up with guns and they didn't use them? When something bad goes down, even a liberal will call a guy with a gun, and they'd be extremely upset if they found when the good guy showed up, he didn't have the gun. So this isn't about guns for them. It's about they don't want you to have the guns. They want the police to have the guns. They want the military to have the guns. They want the security detail for the politicians to have the guns, but they don't want you to have the guns. And then they use as justification somebody who got blown away in a school or a post office or a restaurant or out on the street to take the guns away from you, as if you were the one who committed the crime. That's how they're doing this, guys. They're making it sound like you're the one who committed the crime because you're the one who ends up being criminalized when this gun ban goes through. What is a gun ban? It's saying to the human being who owns that gun that the government says you shouldn't have, it's saying if you have this after midnight on the 29th, you will be a criminal in the eyes of the state. And that's what they're calling for. They're calling for the criminality of innocent people who had nothing to do with the crime.
For a fact, as soon as they hear it, their first thing, but right before they do the thoughts and prayers, that's second, right before they do the thoughts and prayers is to mention how important the Second Amendment is. Before thoughts and prayers, before. I'm supposed to look at all that and go, yeah, that's the fucking side that I want to be on.
Guess what? The Second Amendment should come before thoughts and prayers. Why is that? Why should the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, which shall not be infringed, by the way, shall not be infringed? Can't get more clear than those 4 words. In all 27 words in the Second Amendment, there's nothing mysterious about it. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. How do you keep that free state free? The well-regulated militia. Who are they regulated by? Are they regulated by the federal government? Highly doubtful, since the first, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments are telling the government, it's putting the constraints on the government. It's saying that the people should not be regulated by the government. Government has no jurisdiction here. The people have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, right to keep and bear arms, right to maintain silence, right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures by the government. So the well-regulated just means well-controlled. In the some of the documents, the Founding Father documents, it's personal self-control. It's that militia's own self-control. Well-regulated means well-controlled by themselves, not by the government. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state. Why? Because those militiamen are armed. How do you secure a free state? How do you keep the free state free? Those militiamen, armed militiamen. And then it says, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed by who? Anybody. You don't have the right to infringe on somebody else's right to keep and bear arms. Which arms should they keep? The Second Amendment doesn't sanction AK-47s and AR-15s and 50 caliber weaponry. It doesn't limit it. So if it doesn't limit it and it doesn't say, then the sky is the limit. Howitzer tank, Black Hawk helicopter, Sikorsky helicopter, anything you can afford to buy in the free market as long as you didn't use force, theft, or coercion to get it. If the government's got it, in other words, if the government's got it, you are free to have it. But our government says, oh, you can't have that. Why? Because they want to eliminate competition. They don't want somebody to be stronger than them. Because when they go out of bounds, which they often do, all the time, they all the time go out of bounds. When they walk and live out of bounds, trampling your rights, stealing your money, giving Ukraine $78.6 billion, running up the balance sheets on the Federal Reserve, wrecking and ruining your future posterity, making them Federal Reserve debt slaves for the rest of their life. They're not even born yet and they're debt slaves. When stuff like that happens, then guess what? The well-regulated militia comes in so that they can secure a free state, secure and maintain or grab back a free state. That's what the Second Amendment's all about. So in essence, the Second Amendment is higher than thoughts and prayers. Why? because the Second Amendment is what retains freedom. And freedom is life. If you don't have freedom, you don't have life. That's how important the Second Amendment is. And it's not even the Second, it's the concept of the Second Amendment. If the Second Amendment was stricken from the parchment and under the glass at the Smithsonian Institute or wherever it is right now, I can't remember what building it's in right now. It's in Washington, D.C. But if that building burned down and that highly secured document was burned up, you would still have a Second Amendment right, because the principle is you have the right to keep and bear arms and nobody's got a right to infringe on that right. It transcends parchment. It transcends the Bill of Rights. It transcends the Founding Fathers. It is a natural fact that you as a human being have a right to defend yourself against an approaching aggressor. Period. I mean, this has nothing to do with politics. This has everything to do with, you could call it natural law, but I mean, for lack of a better word, I'll just call it natural law.
Now that I have a child, no, if anything, I'm more far left today than I've ever been.
And that would mean you're more against your child than you've ever been, because the far left wants your child disarmed, disempowered, victimized. The far left, and really, not just the left, it's the right, it's left and right. It's a dog and pony show. It's a big smoke screen under the big top. It's a hall of mirrors. It's all illusory. But let's just take the left. The left wants his child and him to be disempowered and disarmed. The left wants him to register his firearms so he can be on a registry, so that the confiscation time comes, when it comes, not if it comes, his name will pop up and his child's name will pop up, and then the government will march their tanks into that neighborhood and go door to door, and they'll collect all those weapons that you registered because that's what you asked for, doofus.
And I apologize if I give way more of a fuck about school shootings than I do a drag show at a library. And every single one of you who feels the complete opposite, I'm sorry, but you're a f***hole.
What did he just do? He just alienated a whole swath of his fellow countrymen. But guess what? That's the plan of the powers that shouldn't be. They want this guy operating on this high level of emotion and just completely crushing under his feet any logic, any reason, any truth, so that he can polarize himself against the rest of the people. This has four, let's see, is this guy, Corey Ryan Forrester? He's got two, I don't even know who this guy is, comedian, author. Apparently he lives in Nashville because he said the shooting happened right down the street from him. He's got 218,000. These guys are always popular. 218,000 Twitter followers. So he just now polarized a whole bunch of people who are decidedly against hypersexualized men dressing as women and reading storybooks to kids in libraries.
You mean nothing to me. You are scum.
Wow.
I'm not saying that every conservative on earth is scum. I'm talking about the specific ones that look at a school shooting and then still later on that day want to act like cross-dressing is some huge issue when you won't say a...
Is that all Drag Queen Story Hour is? Is that all it is? That's all it is, Brian. It's just cross-dressing. That's all it is. There's way more damage that comes out of the barrel of a gun than out of a guy who's cross-dressing and reading a story to your child at the library. Really? You don't count mental damage as very serious, significant, long-term damage in the precious, tender mind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old. Kids are wet cement, guys. Whatever impression you put into that wet cement ends up staying. You want to really mess a kid up for the rest of their lives, keep doing this kind of garbage. And then take their firearms away from them so that when they wake up and they're ready to fight, they don't have anything to fight with.
Word about a kid with a gun, because that goes against your narrative that they help us out.
I have a narrative. You know what my narrative is? Truth over fiction. Armament over disarmament. Empowerment over disempowerment. This guy right here, I will fight for his right to keep and bear arms. And he will fight against your right to keep and bear arms. He will beg the government, please institute that assault weapons ban. That's going to keep me safe. That makes zero sense. How is a politician scribbling lines on a piece of paper going to keep your kids safe in school? As a matter of fact, School is a 15,000, if you're talking about public school, I think this was a private school because it was like a Lutheran or Presbyterian church school. So I think it was private, but private or public, I mean, you got some crazy nonsense going on in schools. You know who the best teacher is for your child? Get up right now and go look in the nearest mirror. It's you. Nobody's going to care about your child like you do. The mental, physical, and spiritual well-being of your child. Nobody's going to care about your child like you do. See, the problem with Americans right now is we've been pigeonholed into this lifestyle where we think we got to have 2 jobs or we ain't going to make it. You know what? You can cut back. You don't have to live in that big house. You don't have to be driving that nice car. You don't have to be going out to eat every night. You don't have to be going to Disney World. If your kids are really worth it to you, you'll make the sacrifices and you'll pull them out of the 15,000 hour public fool indoctrination system, because that's what it is. It's an indoctrination system. It's an indoctrination camp set up by the federal government under the Department of Education. And no precept, no edict, no ordinance, no regulation, no law written by politicians is going to make your child any safer, because we know that when they make laws, your child gets less safe. You're less safe. You have less money. You have less rights. The more laws they make, the less freedoms you have. The more laws they make, the less money you have to spend in your community at the end of the year. Laws don't make freedom. They don't carve out freedom. They don't stop criminals. They don't stop criminal activity. They don't stop drugs coming across the border. As a matter of fact, if anything, since the drug war, we have a worse problem with drugs because of the government, because of the CIA, the DEA, the ATF, the FBI. Government always makes things worse. It never makes things better, ever. Never better for freedom, never better for your financial perspective and prospectus and outlook, for your safety. Matter of fact, the biggest mass murder in human history is government, to the tune of over 250 to 300 million in the last century alone, excluding wars. Guys, did you hear me? 250 to 300 million people dead at the hands of governments that those people trusted, excluding wars. When you include wars, it's creeping up on 1 billion. There were 614 to 644,000 that died in the Civil War alone. What was that? It was the War of Northern Aggression, because Lincoln had to have the tyrannical stranglehold over all the U.S. states and just couldn't let the Southerners secede. It wasn't about slavery. We know what Lincoln thought about slaves and the black folk and the superiority of the white folk. You know what he thought about that. They make statues, the great emancipator. Do you know what the great emancipator actually said? Do you know your history? Have you actually read Lincoln? Read the debate between Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln, and you'll come away with a different perspective of Abraham Lincoln. So you don't have to trust a history book or anything. Just look at what Lincoln said with his own words on what he thought about the black man and the superiority of the white race. He's a tyrant. Lincoln was one of the worst tyrants in American history. All right, let's see a couple more seconds of this guy.
So no, I think as a father, I know exactly where the I stand, and this is pathetic. So, love to everybody in Nashville.
Love to everybody except the conservatives who think that the Second Amendment is important.